The massive starship Starforge drifted through the void like a metal city. Its hull stretched for miles, covered in weapon systems and docking bays. Inside the ship's main conference room, 12 different alien species sat around a circular table made of some kind of glowing crystal. Admiral Kethver, a tall blue-skinned creature with 4 eyes, stood at the head of the table. His voice echoed through the translation devices that each species wore. The Devourer threat grows stronger. Each day, they have consumed 3 more star systems in the past month. Our current military tactics are not working. The other aliens murmured their agreement. Each species had sent their best military leaders to this meeting. The Altarians, tall beings made of living crystal, sparkled as they moved. The Nexians used their 4 arms to gesture as they spoke. The collective drones sat perfectly still, their hive minds already sharing thoughts faster than speech. "We need something new," continued Admiral Kethver. "Something the Devourers cannot predict or counter. I propose we create an exchange program. Each species will send their elite warriors to train with the others. We will learn new tactics and create a unified fighting force." General Vyses, a serpentine creature who could change colors like a chameleon, raised his head. "An interesting idea. My people have perfected stealth techniques over thousands of years. We could teach the others. And we have mastered group combat through our hive mind," added Drone Quinn 77. "Individual fighters could benefit from our coordination methods." The discussion continued for hours. Each species boasted about their military achievements and the techniques they could share. The Altarians spoke of their crystal armor that could deflect energy weapons. The Nexians demonstrated their lightning-fast reflexes. The Voidlings showed holographic images of their advanced camouflage technology. Finally, Admiral Kethver activated a holographic display showing a blue-green planet. This brings us to our newest member, the humans of Earth. They recently joined our coalition after successfully defending their world from a pirate invasion. Several aliens made dismissive sounds. The humans were still considered primitive by galactic standards. Their technology was centuries behind the rest of the coalition. Their weapons were crude chemical projectiles and simple energy beams. "What could they possibly teach us?" asked Commander Zephyr, his crystalline body flashing with what humans might recognize as amusement. "They barely have space travel. Their longest war lasted only 6 of their years." Admiral Kethver's expression remained neutral, perhaps, but they did repel the Kravik pirates. The same pirates who had been raiding our outer colonies for months. The humans destroyed their entire fleet. "Lucky shot," muttered General Vultan, flexing all 4 of his arms in a gesture of dismissal. Or perhaps the pirates were already weakened from fighting real soldiers. The Admiral touched a control on the table. The hologram changed to show a human military base. Rows of identical buildings surrounded a large open area where small figures moved in formation. The humans have agreed to participate in the exchange program. They will host the first training session at one of their military facilities. "How generous of them," said General Vyses, his scales shifting to a mocking green color. "I am sure we will learn much about primitive warfare techniques. Perhaps they will teach us to throw rocks more accurately." The other aliens laughed at this. The sound was strange, as each species had their own version of laughter. The Altarians rang like bells. The Nexians chittered like insects. The collective drones made no sound at all, sharing their amusement silently. Admiral Kethver raised a hand for silence. "Each species will send 4 of their finest warriors. They will spend 30 standard days training with the humans. Then we will rotate to the next species. By the end of 1 year, we will have shared knowledge with all coalition members." 30 days? General Velton looked shocked. "That seems excessive for learning basic human tactics. Surely a few days would be sufficient." The humans requested 30 days. They said it was their minimum training period. More laughter echoed through the room. The idea that humans needed 30 days to teach what other species could learn in hours seemed ridiculous. Most coalition training programs used advanced virtual reality and direct neural downloads. A soldier could master new tactics in minutes. Very well, said Commander HFY, his crystal body now glowing with confident light. I volunteer to lead the Altarian delegation. It will be interesting to see how primitive beings conduct warfare. Other generals quickly volunteered as well. The chance to easily outperform the humans was too tempting to pass up. It would be a simple way to demonstrate their species' superiority while fulfilling their coalition obligations. Within hours, selection committees were formed. Each species chose their most elite warriors. These were beings who had never known defeat, who had mastered every combat technique their civilizations could teach. They were perfect soldiers, enhanced by technology and bred for war. The Altarian delegation consisted of Commander HFY himself, along with 3 other crystal warriors who could generate blinding light and were nearly invulnerable to energy. Weapons. The Nexian team included General Valtan and 3 soldiers famous for their speed and precision. The collective sent 4 drones who could coordinate their actions with perfect timing. As the warriors prepared for their journey to Earth, they shared their expectations. This would be a pleasant break from real training. They would learn a few quaint human customs, demonstrate their own superior abilities, and return home with amusing stories about primitive warfare. The human military base was called Camp Pendleton. It orbited Earth in a large space station designed to train soldiers in zero gravity and various atmospheric conditions. The aliens had seen images of the facility and were not impressed. It looked crude compared to their own training centers, which used advanced holographic environments and sophisticated combat simulators. The transport ships carrying the alien warriors docked at the station exactly on schedule. As they disembarked, they were met by a small group of humans in simple green uniforms. The humans looked tiny compared to the towering Altarians, and multi-limbed Nexian stepped forward. He was average height for his species, with short gray hair and lines around his eyes that suggested age. His uniform bore symbols that the aliens' translators identified as indicating high rank. "Welcome to Camp Pendleton," the human said in a voice that seemed too quiet for someone addressing such powerful warriors. "I am Lieutenant Colonel Jake Martinez. I will be your instructor for the next 30 days. The aliens exchanged glances. The small, aging human was supposed to teach them about warfare? Commander HFY's crystal body flickered with barely contained amusement. "We look forward to this cultural exchange," Commander HFY said in his most diplomatic tone. "Perhaps we can learn from each other." Lieutenant Colonel Martinez nodded. "Oh, you'll learn. That's guaranteed. Your quarters are ready. Chow is at 1800 hours. Lights out at 2200. Formation tomorrow at 0500. As the aliens were led to their quarters, they marveled at the simplicity of the human facility. Everything was functional, but basic. No luxury, no advanced technology, just plain metal walls and simple furniture. "This will be easier than I thought," General Velton whispered to his companions. 30 days of rest while pretending to learn from these primitives. None of them noticed the small smile on Lieutenant Colonel Martinez's face as he watched them settle in. None of them wondered why the human had seemed so confident. And none of them questioned why their rooms had been designed to accommodate their various anatomies so perfectly. They would learn the answers to those questions soon enough. The alarm screamed through the alien quarters at exactly 5 in the morning. The sound was unlike anything the warriors had ever heard, a harsh, grating noise that seemed designed to cause maximum discomfort. Commander HFY's crystalline body cracked slightly from the shock, tiny fractures appearing along his arms as his natural harmonics were disrupted. General Velton jerked awake so violently that his forearms, tangled together as he tried to get out of his sleeping pod. Drone Quinn 77 sat up with perfect posture, but even his hive mind training could not have prepared him for the jarring human wake-up call. General Tice's scales flashed bright red in alarm, his camouflage abilities completely overwhelmed by the sudden stress. The lights in their rooms blazed to full brightness instantly. No gentle awakening sequence, no soft music, just brutal transition from sleep to full alertness. The aliens stumbled out of their quarters, still trying to understand what was happening. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez stood in the corridor, fully dressed and looking like he had been awake for hours. Behind him stood two other humans in similar uniforms. The smaller human had sergeant stripes on his sleeve and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. "Good morning, warriors," Martinez said in the same quiet voice from the day before. "This is Sergeant Alex Johnson and Captain Lisa Parker. You have exactly 3 minutes to get dressed and fall in outside. Move." The aliens looked at each other in confusion. 3 minutes seemed impossibly short. In their own military's morning, preparation took at least 30 minutes, often longer for proper equipment checks and grooming rituals. "Excuse me," Commander HFY said, his voice ringing like a bell. "Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. We require more time to prepare ourselves according to our species protocols." Sergeant Johnson stepped forward. He was even smaller than Martinez, but something about his presence made the large aliens take a step back. "Protocol as you have. 2 minutes and 30 seconds now. I suggest you move unless you want to start your first day with push-ups." The aliens had no idea what push-ups were, but the sergeant's tone suggested it would not be pleasant. They rushed back to their rooms and tried to dress as quickly as possible. Commander HFY's crystal body made it difficult to put on the simple human uniforms they had been given. General Veltan struggled with clothes designed for two-armed beings. Drone Quinn 77 found the individual preparation disturbing, as his species normally helped each other dress as a group activity. They made it outside with seconds to spare, looking disheveled and confused. The humans were already standing in perfect formation, motionless as statues. Their uniforms were identical and spotless. Their boots reflected the artificial sunlight from the station's environmental systems. "You will form up in a line," Captain Parker said. Her voice was crisp and clear. "Stand at attention means feet together, arms at your sides, eyes forward. Do not move unless ordered to move." The aliens tried to copy the human posture, but it felt unnatural and uncomfortable. Commander HFY's crystalline structure was not designed for rigid positions. General Vezes found it impossible to keep his serpentine body completely still. General Veltan did not know what to do with his extra arms. "Today we begin with physical training," Martinez announced. "We will start with a warm-up. Everyone drop and give me 20 push-ups." The humans immediately fell to the ground and began moving up and down in a coordinated rhythm. The aliens stared in horror. These humans were voluntarily throwing themselves on the floor and then lifting their entire body weight with just their arms. It looked like some form of punishment or religious ritual. "I do not understand," Commander HFY said. "Why are your soldiers punishing themselves?" Sergeant Johnson walked over until he was standing directly in front of the crystal alien. "This is not punishment. This is warming up. Now drop and give me 20, or I will find something that actually is punishment." The aliens reluctantly got down on the ground and attempted to copy the human movement. It was a disaster. Commander HFY's rigid crystal body could not bend properly. The first attempt to lower himself resulted in a sound like breaking glass as stress fractures appeared along his joints. General Veltan fared better with his forearms, but the exercise was clearly not designed for his anatomy. He could do the movements, but they felt wrong and inefficient. Drone Quinn 77 performed the exercise with mechanical precision. But his face showed confusion about why individual physical improvement was considered important. General Vyses could not do push-ups at all. His serpentine body had no arms to push with. He lay on the ground looking helpless while the humans continued their rhythmic movements. "This is impossible," General Veltan gasped after managing only 5 repetitions. "Why do you torture your soldiers before battle?" Captain Parker looked at him with what might have been sympathy. "This is not torture. This is basic fitness. Human soldiers must be able to function when their equipment fails, when their vehicles break down, when everything goes wrong. Physical fitness is the foundation of all military capability." The warm-up continued with jumping jacks, sit-ups, and running in place. Each exercise was torture for the aliens. Their bodies were not designed for these repetitive movements. Their civilizations had eliminated the need for physical fitness through technology and genetic enhancement. After 30 minutes of what the humans called warming up, the aliens were exhausted. Commander HFY's crystal body was clouded with stress fractures. General Veltan was gasping for air through his breathing slits. Drone Quinn 77 had actually fallen over and could not get back up. "Excellent warm-up," Sergeant Johnson said, with what the aliens were beginning to recognize as sarcasm. "Now we begin the actual physical training." The actual training was even worse. The humans expected them to run for miles without stopping. They had to climb ropes using only their arms. They were forced to crawl through mud under low obstacles. While humans shouted at them to move faster, the aliens had never experienced anything like this. In their militaries, physical requirements were handled by powered armor and enhancement drugs. The idea of improving the body through repeated stress and discomfort was completely foreign. "This is barbaric," General Vyses wheezed as he tried to slither under a wire obstacle. "Civilized beings do not subject themselves to such treatment." "Civilized beings," Sergeant Johnson replied, walking alongside the struggling alien, "prepare for war by training harder than war itself. When the shooting starts and your fancy equipment fails, your body is all you have left." By the end of the first day, 3 of the 12 alien warriors had to be taken to the medical bay. General Veltan had pulled muscles in all 4 arms. 2 of the collective drones had suffered what humans would consider minor dehydration, but what their species classified as a medical emergency. The aliens who remained conscious gathered in their quarters that evening, looking like survivors of a battle. They could not understand how the humans expected them to endure 29 more days of this treatment. "Perhaps we should request a transfer to a different training program," Commander HFY suggested, his crystal body still showing stress fractures from the day's activities, "and admit that we cannot handle primitive human training." "General." Tice's scales flickered between colors as he struggled with the humiliation. "Our governments would never let us forget such shame." Drone Quinn 77 sat quietly, trying to process the day's events through his connection to the hive mind. The collective was having trouble understanding why individual physical improvement was considered important when technology could solve the same problems more efficiently. As they tried to sleep that night, the aliens began to realize that they had seriously underestimated human military training. What they had expected to be a pleasant cultural exchange was turning into the most difficult experience of their lives. None of them knew that the humans considered this first day to be gentle. Introduction. The real training would begin tomorrow. Day 3 began like the others, with the screaming alarm at 5 in the morning. But this time, only 8 of the original 12 alien warriors managed to get out of their beds. The Altarian medics had declared 2 of their crystal warriors unfit for duty after their internal structure had developed too many stress fractures. One Nexian had suffered what his species considered a catastrophic injury, a pulled muscle that would take weeks to heal properly. Commander HFY dragged himself to formation, his once brilliant crystal body now clouded and dim. General Veltan moved slowly, favoring 3 of his forearms. Drone Quinn 77 stood perfectly straight, but his connection to the hive mind was filled with confusion and distress signals. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez looked at the reduced group with no expression on his face. "Good morning. Today we learn about field conditions. You will train in actual environmental situations rather than controlled indoor spaces." Captain Parker gestured toward a large door at the end of the training area. "Through that door is a simulation of various planetary conditions. You will learn to operate in rain, mud, extreme heat, and cold. You will learn to fight when everything goes wrong." The aliens followed the humans through the door and stopped in shock. The room beyond was enormous, filled with what looked like real terrain. Hills, valleys, streams, and forests stretched as far as they could see. Rain fell from artificial clouds overhead, creating muddy streams and slippery surfaces. "This is impossible," General Vises whispered, his scales shifting to colors that indicated deep confusion. "How can weather exist inside a space station?" Sergeant Johnson overheard him. "Welcome to real training conditions. Your enemies will not wait for perfect weather. They will not ask if you are comfortable. They will attack when conditions are worst for you." The humans began moving through the terrain with practiced ease. They seemed to actually enjoy the mud and rain. Their boots splashed through puddles without hesitation. When they slipped on wet rocks, they rolled and kept moving as if nothing had happened. The aliens struggled with every step. Commander HFY's crystal feet had no grip on muddy surfaces. He fell constantly, each impact creating new cracks in his structure. The mud stuck to his transparent body, making it impossible for him to generate his natural light. General Veltan found that his forearms, usually an advantage, became a liability in the rough terrain. He could not figure out which arms to use for balance and which to use for climbing. He kept getting tangled in the low branches and thorny bushes that the humans moved through effortlessly. Drone Quinn 77 faced a different problem. His species relied on perfect communication with the hive mind for coordination. But the environmental conditions interfered with his mental connection. For the first time in his life, he was truly alone inside his own head. The experience was terrifying. "Why do you make training harder than actual combat?" General Veltan asked as he struggled to climb over a fallen log that the humans had vaulted easily. Captain Parker turned back to look at him. "Because if training is harder than combat, then combat feels easy. We train until impossible becomes difficult, and difficult becomes routine." This concept was revolutionary to the aliens. Their militaries trained in perfect conditions, using the best equipment available. The idea of deliberately making things harder made no sense to species that had spent thousands of years optimizing everything. The day got worse. Sergeant Johnson introduced them to what he called tactical movement. This meant crawling through mud under low obstacles while carrying heavy packs. The aliens had to move from cover to cover while avoiding simulated enemy fire. "Keep your heads down," Johnson shouted as energy beams flashed overhead. "The enemy does not care about your comfort. They want you dead. Move like your life depends on it, because someday it will." Commander HFY tried to crawl through a muddy ditch, but his crystal body scraped against every rock and root. The sounds he made were like fingernails on glass, alerting every simulated enemy in the area. His natural camouflage was useless. When covered in brown mud, General Vises found his serpentine advantages completely negated by the terrain. His species' camouflage worked perfectly in their desert homeworld, but these Earth-like conditions were foreign to him. His color-changing abilities could not match the complex patterns of mud, leaves, and shadows. The humans moved through the same course like ghosts. They used every piece of cover, every shadow, every fold in the ground. When their advanced equipment was taken away and replaced with basic gear, they adapted instantly. When their weapons malfunctioned, they fixed them or found alternatives. How do you do this? Drone Quinn 77 asked one of the human soldiers during a brief rest. How do you function when everything is wrong? The human, a young woman with mud streaked across her face, looked surprised by the question. Everything is always wrong in combat. Equipment breaks, plans fail, weather changes, people get hurt. We train for when things go wrong because that is when battles are won or lost. The alien drone processed this information through his damaged connection to the hive mind. His species planned for success, not failure. They created perfect strategies and used superior technology to ensure victory. The idea of preparing for failure was completely alien to their thinking. By midday, the alien warriors were exhausted, filthy, and demoralized. They had been crawling through mud for hours, carrying packs that seemed designed to torture them. Their advanced equipment had been replaced with basic human gear that required constant maintenance and manual operation. This is not training, General Veltan gasped as he collapsed behind a simulated rock formation. This is systematic abuse. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez appeared beside him as if from nowhere. The human commander was also covered in mud, but he looked comfortable and alert. This is preparation. Every galactic species we have studied trains in perfect conditions. They optimize everything, eliminate every difficulty, make everything as easy as possible. He gestured toward the muddy landscape around them. But war is not optimal. War is chaos, confusion, and everything going wrong at the same time. We train in chaos so that when real chaos comes, we know how to function. The afternoon brought new horrors. The humans introduced them to hand-to-hand combat training. Not the elegant martial arts that some alien species practiced, but brutal, practical fighting designed for survival. They learned to fight when their weapons failed, when they were injured, when they were outnumbered and outgunned. Commander HFY watched in amazement as two human soldiers demonstrated combat techniques. They moved with a combination of skill and desperation that he had never seen before. When one fighter lost his weapon, he used rocks, sticks, even handfuls of mud. When the other was knocked down, he continued fighting from the ground. "Your species fights like cornered animals," he observed. Sergeant Johnson grinned, showing teeth stained with mud. "Exactly. Cornered animals are the most dangerous kind. They have nothing to lose and everything to fight for." As the day ended, 4 more alien warriors had to be evacuated to the medical bay. The remaining aliens sat in their quarters, trying to understand what they had experienced. Their reports back to their governments described human training as organized insanity and preparation for failure. But a few of them were beginning to see something else. They were starting to understand that human strength was not physical or technological, it was psychological. Humans trained their minds to function when everything went wrong, when all advantages were gone, when only willpower remained. General Vizes looked at his reflection in the polished metal wall. His scales were still showing stress colors, but underneath the fear and confusion, something else was growing. For the first time in his life, he was being challenged not just to be better, but to be tougher. "Perhaps," he said quietly to the others, "we are learning something after all." By the end of the first week, only 5 alien warriors remained in the training program. The others had either quit or been medically evacuated. Those who stayed were a stubborn group who refused to accept defeat, even when their bodies screamed. For them to give up, Commander HFY was the most changed. His crystal body, once perfect and clear, now showed permanent stress patterns from the constant physical demands. But something unexpected had happened. The cracks and clouding had created new resonance frequencies in his structure. He discovered he could use these to absorb and distribute impact forces better than his original perfect form. During hand-to-hand combat training, he learned to turn his body's natural vibrations into a weapon. When he struck targets, the harmonic frequencies could shatter objects or disorient opponents. His trainers called it crystal singing, and it was something no Altarian had ever developed before. General Velton had solved his forearm coordination problem in a completely different way. Instead of trying to use human fighting techniques, he developed his own hybrid style. He used 2 arms for traditional human boxing, while the other 2 handled grappling and throwing. The combination created a fighting method that was devastatingly effective and uniquely his own. The human instructors were fascinated. Sergeant Johnson spent hours working with Velton to perfect techniques that no 2-armed being could ever use. The general found himself teaching the humans as much as learning from them. Drone Quinn 77 faced the biggest challenge. His species had never developed individual identity or independent thinking. But the constant interference with his hive mind connection during training forced him to rely on his own judgment for the first time in his life. At first, this isolation was terrifying. He made mistakes that the hive mind would never have allowed. But slowly, he began to develop something his species had never possessed: creativity. When standard tactics failed, he started inventing new solutions on the spot. Captain Parker worked closely with him, teaching him decision-making techniques that humans took for granted. "Trust your instincts," she told him repeatedly. "You have a brain, use it." General Vises underwent perhaps the most dramatic change. His serpentine body, designed for desert camouflage, had seemed useless in the varied terrain of human training. But the humans taught him that camouflage was not just about changing colors. It was about becoming invisible through movement. Positioning and timing. He learned to move like water, flowing around obstacles instead of over them. His natural flexibility, combined with human stealth techniques, made him nearly impossible to detect. He could slither through spaces that even the smallest human could not fit through. The real breakthrough came during the second week, when Lieutenant Colonel Martinez introduced them to the concept of learning from failure. This was perhaps the most alien idea the warriors had encountered. "In your militaries," Martinez explained as they sat around a campfire after a particularly brutal day of training, "you plan for success. You use superior technology and tactics to ensure victory. But what happens when your plans fail?" "Commander." Zephyr's crystal body flickered with confusion. "Plans do not fail if they are properly made." Martinez smiled and threw a stick into the fire. "Every plan fails when it meets the enemy. The enemy gets a vote in how the battle goes. They will do things you do not expect. Your equipment will break at the worst possible moment. Your communications will fail when you need them most." He gestured toward the human soldiers sitting nearby. "So we train for failure. We practice fighting when everything goes wrong. We learn to win when we should lose." The aliens struggled to understand this concept. Their cultures had spent millennia perfecting systems to prevent failure. The idea of deliberately seeking failure as a learning tool was revolutionary. The next day, Martinez demonstrated this philosophy in action. He divided the mixed group of humans and aliens into teams and gave them impossible missions. The objectives were designed to fail, with too few resources, too little time, and too many obstacles. "Your mission is to capture this position," he told them, pointing to a fortified hilltop surrounded by difficult terrain. "You have half the soldiers you need. Your equipment is old and unreliable, and the enemy knows you are coming." The alien warriors looked at the mission parameters and immediately began calculating why it could not be accomplished. The humans looked at the same information and started planning how to make it work anyway. During the exercise, everything went wrong exactly as planned. Weapons jammed, communications failed, and team members were killed by simulated enemy fire. The aliens watched in amazement as the humans adapted to each failure, found workarounds for every problem, and eventually achieved objectives that should have been impossible. "How did you do that?" Drone Quinn 77 asked after the exercise ended. His team had failed completely when their primary plan fell apart. But the human team had succeeded despite losing half their equipment and most of their soldiers. "We planned for failure," explained the human team leader, a young sergeant named Mike Brown. "We knew the weapons would jam, so we brought backup weapons and learned to fix problems quickly. We knew communications would fail, so we practiced hand signals and developed backup coordination methods." The alien drone processed this information through his increasingly independent thought processes. "But if you expect failure, how do you maintain morale and confidence?" Sergeant Brown looked puzzled by the question. Expecting failure does not mean accepting defeat. It means being ready to overcome failure when it happens. Every failure is just another problem to solve. This conversation was the turning point for the remaining alien warriors. They began to see that human training was not about making soldiers stronger or faster. It was about making them more adaptable and resilient. The third week brought their first real test. Alarms sounded throughout the station, and all training stopped immediately. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez's voice echoed through the communication system. "This is not a drill. Devourer scouts have been detected approaching this sector. All personnel to battle stations." The alien warriors felt their blood freeze. The Devourers were the reason for this entire training exchange. These were the enemies that had been consuming star systems across the galaxy, the threat that no coalition force had been able to stop. "Suit up," Sergeant Johnson ordered. Time to see if all this training was worth anything. The mixed human-alien teams moved with surprising coordination. The aliens found themselves using techniques they had learned over the past weeks, adapting to equipment failures and communication problems, as if they had been doing it for years. Commander, HFY's modified crystal resonance helped jam Devourer sensors. General Veltan's four-armed fighting style proved devastatingly effective in close combat. Drone Quinn 77's newly developed individual thinking allowed him to coordinate with human soldiers in ways the hive mind never could have achieved. General Vice's moved through the station's corridors like a shadow, using his serpentine flexibility and human-learned stealth to gather intelligence on enemy positions. When the battle ended 3 hours later, the Devourer scouts had been completely destroyed. Not a single enemy had escaped to report back to their main force. The victory was total and decisive. As the teams gathered for debriefing, the alien warriors realized something important had happened. They had not just survived their first real combat, they had excelled. The brutal training that had seemed like torture had prepared them for exactly this kind of chaos and uncertainty. The Devourers fight by creating chaos, Martinez explained during the after-action review. They disrupt communications, jam sensors, and attack when their enemies are confused and disorganized. Most coalition forces fall apart under that kind of pressure. He looked at the mixed group of humans and aliens, all of them dirty and exhausted but victorious. "But you did not fall apart. You adapted. You overcame. You won." For the first time since arriving at the human training facility, the alien warriors felt truly proud of their accomplishments. They had learned something more valuable than new weapons or tactics. They had learned how to be stronger than their circumstances. The news of the victory against the Devourer scouts spread through the galaxy like wildfire. For the first time in over a year, a coalition force had achieved complete victory against the mysterious enemy. Not a single Devourer had escaped. The alien governments that had been receiving horrified reports about human training methods suddenly found themselves very interested in the results. Admiral Kethver arrived at Camp Pendleton 3 days after the battle. He brought with him a delegation of military leaders from every coalition species. They came expecting to find broken alien warriors traumatized by primitive human training. Instead, they found something completely unexpected. Commander HFY stood before the delegation, his crystal body no longer the perfect, clear structure he had arrived with. The stress patterns and fractures from weeks of training had created A new kind of beauty. A warrior's body marked by experience and hardship. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that had never existed before. Honored leaders, he began, I must report that everything we believed about military training was wrong. The delegation murmured in surprise. Admiral Kethver's 4 eyes, focused intently on the crystal warrior, explain. We have spent thousands of years trying to eliminate hardship, difficulty, and failure from our military training. We believe that perfect conditions would create perfect soldiers. But the humans have shown us that strength comes from overcoming adversity, not avoiding it. General Veltin stepped forward, moving his 4 arms in a complex pattern that demonstrated his new fighting techniques. The humans deliberately make training harder than combat. They break their equipment on purpose. They train in the worst possible conditions. At first, we thought this was primitive and cruel. He paused, flexing all 4 arms simultaneously. But when the Devourers attacked, we were ready for chaos. Our equipment failed, our communications were jammed, and our plans fell apart. But we adapted and overcame because the humans had taught us to expect failure and triumph anyway. Drone. Quinn 77 spoke next, his voice carrying an independence that shocked the other collective representatives. The humans forced me to think for myself when the hive-mind connection was interrupted. This individual thinking allowed me to coordinate with human soldiers in ways the collective never could have achieved. I learned to be creative, to improvise, to solve problems that the hive mind had no solutions for. The delegation was stunned. The idea that a collective drone could develop individual thinking was revolutionary. The hive mind had always been considered the ultimate form of military coordination. General Vises slithered forward, his scales shifting through colors that indicated deep conviction. The humans taught me that camouflage is not just about changing colors. It is about becoming invisible through movement, timing, and understanding your environment. I learned to flow like water, to become one with my surroundings in ways my species never imagined. Admiral Kethver looked at Lieutenant Colonel Martinez, who had been standing quietly during the alien presentations. What is your assessment of these warriors? Martinez stepped forward. They are no longer the same soldiers who arrived here a month ago. They have kept their natural abilities but added human adaptability and resilience. They are now hybrid warriors who combine the best of both approaches. He gestured toward the aliens. More importantly, they understand the philosophy behind the training. They can teach others not just the techniques, but the mindset that makes the techniques effective. The delegation spent the next 3 days observing training sessions and reviewing battle footage from the Devourer encounter. They watched human and alien warriors working together with a coordination that seemed impossible between such different species. During one demonstration, they saw Commander HFY use his crystal resonance to jam enemy sensors, while General Veltan used his 4-armed fighting style to overwhelm opponents who expected 2-armed combat. Drone Quinn 77 coordinated the team using individual decision-making skills that allowed for flexibility the hive mind could never achieve. General Vises moved through a complex obstacle course like liquid, using human stealth techniques combined with his natural abilities to become nearly invisible. When his equipment failed, he adapted instantly, using improvised tools and backup methods that human training had taught him. This is remarkable, Admiral Kethver admitted to his staff. These warriors are more effective than either species could produce alone. The real proof came when the delegation was shown tactical simulations of how these hybrid techniques would work against Devourer forces. The computer models showed that mixed human-alien units had a 60% higher survival rate and an 80% higher mission success rate than traditional coalition forces. Within days of the delegation's return to the Starforge, new orders were issued throughout the coalition. Every species was to send additional warriors to human training facilities. More importantly, Human instructors were to be stationed at alien military academies to teach the new training philosophy. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez was promoted to general and given command of the new Coalition Training Command. His first order was to establish training facilities throughout Coalition space, each one adapted for different alien physiologies, but all following the same basic principles. The Altarians built training centers that could handle their crystal warriors' unique needs while still exposing them to the stress and chaos that built mental toughness. The Nexians redesigned their four-armed combat techniques to incorporate human adaptability principles. The collective began training individual drones to think independently while maintaining their connection to the hive mind. Captain Parker was assigned to develop new training curricula that combined human psychology with alien capabilities. Sergeant Johnson found himself teaching drill instructor techniques to beings who had never heard of verbal motivation or stress conditioning. The changes went beyond just military training. The alien species began to see applications for human resilience philosophy in other areas. Engineers started designing systems that could function when components failed. Scientists began conducting experiments under adverse conditions to test real-world applications. 6 months later, when the Devourers launched their first major assault since the Scout incident, they faced something they had never encountered before: Coalition forces that did not break when their technology failed. Warriors who fought harder when conditions got worse. Soldiers who turned chaos into opportunity. The battle lasted 3 days and ended with the complete destruction of the Devourer fleet. For the first time in the war, Coalition forces had achieved victory against a major enemy force. The tide had turned. General Martinez stood on the bridge of the new Coalition flagship, watching the debris field where the Devourer fleet had been destroyed. Around him, alien and human officers worked together with the easy coordination of shared experience and mutual respect. Commander HFY approached, his crystal body now bearing the marks of multiple battles. General, the alien governments are requesting expansion of the training programs. They want to convert their entire militaries to the new system. Martinez nodded. Good, but remember, this is not about making aliens fight like humans. It is about teaching everyone to be tougher than their circumstances. He looked out at the stars, where Coalition fleets were already moving to liberate systems that had been lost to the Devourers. The galaxy is learning that strength comes not from avoiding hardship, but from overcoming it. That is the most important lesson we can teach. In training facilities across Coalition space, new recruits from dozens of species were learning to push beyond their limits, to adapt when plans failed, and to find strength in adversity. They were becoming something new, not human, not alien, but warriors forged in the crucible of shared hardship and mutual respect. The age of easy victories and perfect conditions was over. The age of resilient, adaptable, unbreakable warriors had begun. And at the heart of it all was a simple human truth, that the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire, and the best soldiers are made by training them to overcome the impossible.